Hi everyone, in this video we're going to be adding the combat animations to our game. So I want to start by replacing this player file with the latest version. So I'm going to navigate over to where this is stored on the hard drive and just drag in this new file and replace it. Okay, so going back into Unity, this will take a moment to re-import. And when that's done, I've got a bunch of errors here, but I can safely clear those, I think. Now, if I go onto the player mesh, you can see it's actually disappearing and reappearing. And I think this is just happening because we changed the rig a little bit in the last Blender episode. So I'm just going to delete this from the scene and drag it back in, and it should be happy now. So on this player object, do need to set up the player animator and also just reconnect this target mesh of the equipment manager to the body mesh there. Alright, now I'm going to delete all of the equipment except for the sword and the shield, since those are new and I want to set up items for those. So delete the rest of these. Break prefab instance, that's fine. And now I'll go into the item meshes folder and just drag in the shield and the sword. And then going into the equipment sprites folder, I'll drag in my sword and shield icons, just select both of these and change their texture type to sprite, and apply that. Okay, so now going into the items folder, I'm going to create a new equipment item. I'll call this sword, and I'm going to have to set up all these properties quickly, so that's called sword there as well. The icon is the sword icon, of course. The equip slot is weapon. I'll give it a damage modifier of 5. And then for the mesh, we just drag in that sword mesh we created, and doesn't cover any mesh regions, so we can just leave that. Then I'll do the same thing for the shield item. So I'll name that here, set up the sprite, then set the equip slot to shield, give it some armor modifier, and finally set up the mesh. So just drag in shield. Okay, so we have got the item set up. Now, I'd like to be able to pick these off the ground like we're currently doing for the armor here. So we need a preview version of these shield and sword meshes, because when it's a skin mesh renderer like this, we can't actually position this in the scene. So back a few episodes, we created this script for converting the skinned mesh renderer to a mesh renderer mesh filter pair. So I'll select the shield and the sword, say add component, and can just search for this mesh from skinned mesh script that we created. I'll add that, and it will set that up nicely for us. So we've got these two items here. I think what I'll do is I'll grab the plate body and the plate legs, just Command D to duplicate that, and I'm going to drag this over here. And then just position it roughly where I want. And I'll rename this to sword and shield. Get rid of these preview objects and replace that with these guys. Let me reset the transforms on these. I want to change the rotation here. Same thing for the shield. Oh, what am I doing? Let me reset this first, and then rotate that around. Okay, that looks fine. And then we want to set up the actual items on each of these. So instead of referring to the plate body, it refers to the sword, and the shield refers to the shield. Okay, so that should be working. Can modify these bounds if we want, but not too bothered for the moment. Let's try this out. So I'll enter play mode, and I'm going to right click on these two to pick them up. I'll just grab some of the armor as well. Might as well get all of it. Press I to go into the inventory, and can equip the shield, the sword, and all of the armor, and run around looking very intimidating. Okay, let's now bring in the combat animations. So I'm going to go onto the player, go into the animations tab here, and just add 6 new animations. So we've got the grip left, grip right, then there's a combat idle, and then an unarmed punch attack, and then 2 sword attacks. Alright, the combat idle should have loop time set to true. So once we've done all of that, you can just press apply. Now I want to start by getting the gripping set up. So basically whenever the character equips something in one of his hands, the appropriate grip animation should play. Now that grip animation should only affect the hand, it shouldn't override the animation on any other part of the body. So we're going to be creating an avatar mask. I'll call this left hand. And under the humanoid section, I'll just click off to the side here to deselect all these regions, and then just select the character's left hand. And I'll duplicate this, call it right hand. And once again under humanoid, I will now deselect the character's left hand and instead select the right hand. Okay, I'm going to double click on the player animator, and in the layers section here, I'm going to click to add a new layer, which I'll call right hand. And I'll go into the settings here. I want to choose the right hand mask, and then I want to find the grip right animation and just drag that in there. Do the same thing for left hand. So set the mask here to left hand, of course, and drag in the grip left. Okay, so our base layer is layer 0, then the right hand is layer 1, left hand is layer 2. So by setting the weight of layer 2 to 1, we can make the character grip an object, and same thing with the weight of layer 1 for the right hand. So let's go into the scripts, and I'm going to create a new C# script called the player animator, which I'll open up. This script is going to inherit from the character animator, so I'll just press Command D to head over to that script, and I want to make things like the animator protected instead of private, so that the derived class can access it, and similarly these methods should be protected and virtual so that they can be overridden. Alright, so now I'll save that, head back to the player animator class, and in here I want a method that gets called when the equipment changes for the player. So I'll call this onEquipment changed. It can take in equipment new item and equipment old item, like so. And in here, let's start by handling the case where we're equipping a new weapon. So we want to set the weight of the right hand layer to 1. So I'll say if the new item is not equal to null, and the new item has an equip slot equal to weapon, then we can say animator.setLayerWeight, layer with an index of 1, weight of 1. Then let's handle the case where we're unequipping a weapon. So we can say else if the new item is null, so we're not equipping anything in its place, and the old item is firstly not null, and also it was a weapon, so equip slot is equal to equipment slot.weapon. Then we want to set the layer weight to 0. So animator.setLayerWeight 1, 0. Alright, let's just copy paste this for the left hand. So change equipment slot.weapon to shield in both of these cases. And instead of layer index 1, it's now layer index 2. Okay, now currently this onEquipment change method isn't being called from anywhere, so let's subscribe it to the onEquipment changed event in the equipment manager class. So I'm going to override the character animator's start method, like so, just call base.start, and then I'll say equipment manager.instance.onEquipmentChanged plus equals our local onEquipmentChanged method. Okay, so we can save that, go into Unity, and once this finishes compiling, I can go into the player object, and remove the character animator and add instead the new player animator. Alright, I'm going to go into play mode, pick up the sword and the shield, and I'm quickly going to go into scene view and just zoom in on this so we can see it a bit better. So opening up the inventory, I'll equip the sword. You can see the right hand closing around that. If I equip the shield, the left hand closes, and if I press U to unequip, then the hands go back to their neutral pose. Okay, so next up, I'd like to get the character to go into his combat stance when he's fighting. So I'm going to open the character combat class, and this is going to have a public bool in combat, which I'll make private to set, and then I'll have a constant float, combat cooldown, so I can maybe set that to 5 seconds. Basically, if the character hasn't performed an attack in the last 5 seconds, then they'll no longer be in combat. So let me also make a float here, last attack time. And so in the update method, if time.time minus the last attack time is greater than the combat cooldown, then we're no longer in combat, so I'll set that to false. And if an attack is performed, then in combat will be set to true, and the last attack time will be equal to time.time. Now, I would like in combat to immediately be set to false if the character kills its target. So in this do damage routine, after taking the damage from the opponent's stats, I'll say if stats.current health is less than or equal to 0, that means we've defeated our opponent, so we're no longer in combat. Alright, so saving that and going into the character animator, I'll now create a protected character combat variable, and I'll assign that in the start method. So combat is equal to getComponent of type character combat, and then in update we can say animator.setBool. This bool will be called, I guess, just in combat, and we'll set that to combat.inCombat. Alright, I'll save that, go into Unity, and open up the player's animator here. I want to go to the base layer, and I also want to find this combat idle. Here it is, so I'll drag that in. And going into the parameters, I'm going to add a new bool called inCombat. Okay, so we can transition from locomotion to combat idle if the in-combat bool is true, but then the character also has to not be moving for this transition to occur. So I'll say speed percent is less than some small value, maybe 0.1. Okay, I'll set has exit time to false, because this transition can occur whenever. And then can adjust the duration of the transition there. Then we transition back to locomotion if the in-combat bool is no longer true. Once again, this doesn't have a particular exit time, so we'll set that to false. But then it must also transition back if the character starts moving. So we can't just add another condition here, because this is an AND condition, and what we really want is an OR condition. So we can just add another transition coming back. So this one here is our in combat is false, and we can set this one, once again, removing has exit time, to be speed percent is greater than, say, 0.1. So let's try this now. I will grab my trusty sword, head over to the enemy, and once I attack him, see we enter the combat stance, and now I haven't attacked for a couple of seconds, so I return to my regular idle pose, and if I run away, then it also returns to the locomotion blend tree. Alright, let's finally get these attack animations set up. So I'm going to add a new parameter, which will be a trigger called attack, And then I'll drag in one of these attack animations, doesn't matter which one. And this can be triggered from any state. So I'll just set the condition here to attack. And when it's finished playing, it will transition to the combat idle. So I can just adjust the duration of that. Now, I say it doesn't matter which clip you use, because we're going to be replacing this clip from our animation script based on what weapon the character is currently using. So let's go into the character animator. In here, we can have a protected animator override controller. I'll just call the override controller. And we're going to assign that in the start method. So override controller is equal to a new animator override controller. We need to pass in our runtime controller. So just say animator.runtime animator controller, and then animator.runtime animator controller is equal to this override controller. And this just allows us an easy way to swap out any of the clips in our animator for some other clip. So to use this, we just have to say override controller, and then in square brackets, the name of the clip that we want to replace. So say, for example, the punch clip is equal to, and we can assign some other clip. Okay, but we're not going to do that just yet. First, we need an array of clips for our attack animations. I'll make a protected animation clip array. I'm going to call this the current attack animation set. And then I'm also going to have a public array of animation clips. This is going to be called the default attack animation set. And in the start method, I'll set current attack animation set equal to the default set. So the idea is that most non-player characters are only going to have a single attack animation set, because unlike the player, they're not going to be changing equipment. So their current attack animation set will always be equal to the default attack animation set, but for the player, whenever the equipment gets changed, we can swap this out for a new animation set. Alright, so I'm going to create a protected virtual void here in the character animator called onAttack. And this is first of all going to activate the animator's attack trigger. So we can say set trigger, attack, and then I want to swap out the default attack animation for a random animation in the current attack animation set. So you can say int attack index is equal to random.range from 0 to current attack animation set dot length, and then I'll say override controller, and I want to pass in the name of the default attack animation. So in this case it was punch, and I want to set this equal to current attack animation set with an index of attack index. Now I don't particularly want to hardcode this name here. What I'm instead going to have is a public animation clip called the replaceable attack animation, and then I will just get the name of that clip here. Okay, going into the player animator, we're going to need to be able to tie certain animations to a certain piece of equipment. So I'm going to create a public struct called weapon animations. This is going to hold a public equipment for the weapon and its associated animation clips. So there'll be an array of animation clips, and I'll just call it clips. And I want this to be serialized in the inspector, so I'll add the system.serializable attribute, and then make a public array of these weapon animations. Now, it would be nice for these to actually be in a dictionary, so we can't have dictionaries in the inspector at the moment, but we can just populate it at runtime. So dictionary, equipment as the key, and animation clip array as the value. Call this the weapon animations dictionary. And then in the start method, we can just loop through all of the weapon animations. So for each weapon animation A in the weapon animations array, I'll say weapon animations dictionary dot add, passing in a.weapon and its clips. Okay, gonna have to initialize the dictionary first. It's equal to new dictionary. Okay, so then when the equipment is changed, if we're equipping a new weapon, then we want to check if our weapon animation dictionary contains that weapon. So I'll pass in new item. If it does, then we want to set our current attack animation set equal to the set in that dictionary with a key of our new item. Alright, now if we're unequipping our weapon, we just want to set the current attack animation set back to the default attack animation set. Okay, let's save that. Go into Unity, wait for that to compile, and then can come into the player animator here. So this clip that I used as my sort of replaceable animation clip here is the punch. So I'm going to drag the punch clip into the replaceable attack animation slot. Then the default attack animations, well, this is just the punch at the moment. And weapon animations, we've only got one weapon, so I'll just add a single element there. That is the sword. So I'll go into items, add the sword, and it has two clips. That is sword attack 1 and sword attack 2. I'm getting a tiny bit ahead of myself. Still need to come back into the character animator quickly and actually subscribe this onAttack method to the onAttack event in the combat script. So in the start method, just say combat.onAttack plus equals our local onAttack method. Okay, so now we should be able to save that, and I'm quickly going to go into the enemy and just give it a little bit more health, say 100, so that I can test out these attack animations without him dying too quickly. So let me just grab my equipment, I'll put this stuff on, and head over here, right click, got a little punch, and then I equip the sword, and now we're randomly going between the two attack animations here. If I unequip, then we're back to good old-fashioned punching. Okay, that is it for this episode. There'll be another integration video following shortly, so until then, cheers.